Hey folks, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about our forest management plan, what a forest management plan is, and why you may want one if you are a landowner or land steward.
Here at Wild East Farm, we have just under 15 acres of mixed woodlands, and talked about it in previous videos, but there's a diversity of forest type. Where I'm standing up here is more on the ridge of the property, and it's primarily dominated by oak trees and is characterized in a lot of it with pretty thick understory. We also have where we've run the pigs, which is closer to the creek and in the bottomland, where it's dominated by tulip poplar and an old pine planting that was abandoned some years ago and hasn't been thinned. So in coming onto the land and having these woodlands, we immediately started thinking about how we wanted to treat them and manage them. And in the last year, over the winter, put together a legitimate management plan for the forests around Wild East Farm. So typically a forest management plan is put together by a registered forester who comes out to the property and looks around and does different surveying techniques to assess the woodland and come up with a strategy for managing the woods for whatever the property owner or land steward's goals are. Patch of May apples coming up really nicely after the burn. This is a lovely spring ephemeral plant here in southern Appalachia. So the landowner's goals can be pretty diverse and ideally are informed by what the forester thinks as well, but they can include timber harvest, invasive species management, habitat restoration for specific threatened and endangered species, and a lot more elements. But those are just some examples of what a forester is going to be looking at when they come out to your property. And what getting a forest management plan does that's signed off by a registered forester is it opens up funding opportunities to get the work done in the woods. So the NRCS has a pretty robust pool of funding to pay for these types of forest improvements, but in order to qualify, you have to have the management plan. So we recently got NRCS funding starting this year to help pay for some of the invasive species removal and some of the thinning that we're going to do in these paddocks to open up enough sunlight into the understory that we can get grasses established and turn this into a silvopasture. You can see just how thick it is, especially in this stand. There's almost no light penetration and very thick forest floor. And those are some of our goals. So we're aiming to move a fair bit of the woods on the property in this direction, and it's a costly effort. So having the right type of plan in place really can help open up opportunities to get that work paid for. There's also a hefty tax incentive for landowners to get a management plan and to follow it. A lot of folks in rural spaces will use agricultural present use to get a tax break on their property taxes, but a lot of folks don't own farmable land that they can lease, which is what most folks end up doing. Is they'll lease it to someone who's producing hay and get that tax break. But for properties that are mostly wooded, you can get a similar property tax incentive from the government by following and implementing a strategic forest management plan. It pays to shop around when you're contracting work for NRCS funding, because they'll give you a lump sum that they've budgeted for the work that they want you to do. And if you can get the cost of the actual contract that you go through to get the labor done underneath what the NRCS is willing to pay you, then there's a little bit of extra money there that you can put into your own labor or help reinvest into the landscape in other ways. So it's good to understand the difference in how much the program is willing to pay versus how much the cost of labor and materials is going to cost. And also, for some projects, consider doing them yourselves and utilizing that money to pay yourself for your efforts in improving your land base. So oftentimes you'll find as a landowner that you're able to get the work done to meet your goals and improve the health and biodiversity and ecological succession of your woodlands, and are able to do so in a way that is little to no cost. This is a pretty thick stand of pine that we burned this winter. We had a 15-acre prescribed fire on the property, and you can see some of the char marks. The prescribed fire won't kill many of these large canopy trees, but our goals for this burn were to top kill a lot of the invasive species and to also kill back some of the understory species that are competing with more desirable hardwood trees that are germinating in the understory. The canopy in this part of the woods is also characterized by tulip poplar, and we're planning on, in addition to the burn, coming through and thinning this out to about 50% to allow for enough sunlight to establish pasture grasses. Part of our NRCS funding is also helping pay for the establishment of the grasses in addition to the thinning of the trees. I've gone through over the winter and marked the take stems that we're gonna fell and chip for mulch on the property. And it's kind of a wonderful thing because at some point about 20 years or so ago, someone came through and cut these poplars down, but they re-sprouted, and almost every poplar in this stand has re-sprouted as a multi-stem tree. So what that's going to allow us to do is select out the weaker stems and still keep a nice growing tree in that place to provide shade and diversity in our woodlands. This is the area that the pigs were most recently in on the farm, and it's been amazing to see the regrowth here in early spring just on its own without any clearing. We have a mix of natives and invasives here, but there's a dormant seed bank of fescue and lamb's quarter, common garden weed, chickweed, which was not evident at all until this year back here. And we've still got our privet and Japanese stiltgrass, just this pervasive little one there, honeysuckle and multiflora rose. But we're gonna go through over the next several years and work on getting the invasives out of here and continue to open this up so that we're feathering the edge between the pasture out there and the woodlands in here and open it up to grazing ruminants. Here's an example of some privet that was killed by the fire. You can see the char marks down at the bottom, and unlike in parts of the forest that didn't get a burn, the entire top of the plant has died back. Now it may resprout, and we'll pay attention to that, but this is certainly a setback for a lot of the invasive species here. Before the burn on the forest floor, there was a layer of leaves that had undergone decades of accumulation with very slow decomposition rates. And just like mulch in your garden, it had a mulching effect of keeping understory plants and a lot of native wild perennials completely snuffed out. And by burning off that mulch layer, we're seeing a really promising emergence of all kinds of cool native wildflowers. Black cohosh, there's spots of elderberry showing up, bellwort, mayapple, different woodland violets, And that paired with the disturbance that the pigs offer and opening more sunlight to this closed canopy is going to really help the biodiversity in the landscape flourish. Nice little stand of black cohosh. No, that wasn't here last year. So what a management plan entails when you receive the final product can vary, but it'll almost certainly have a breakdown of the different stands of forest on the property, divided up by characteristics. So we have 3 stands on the farm. One is across the creek, which is a very young, scrappy woodland that's essentially just an abandoned field from 10 years ago where they stopped bush hogging. We've got the strip where the pigs run through that's poplar and pine dominated. And then we have nice upland oak hardwood forest. And within each stand, you'll get a breakdown after forester goes through and does what's called cruising the timber, which is going through and taking measurements at different plots around the property to give you a sense of different metrics like average diameter of the trees in the stand, age class, species composition, and a lot of other factors. But those data really help put together a clear picture for the property manager, landowner, whatever it may be, of what it is they're managing. And then hopefully the management plan articulates how to manage those different areas in different ways based on your goals. Cruising timber is a very simple forestry practice, and there's a lot of resources online for how to do it, but very simple tools are employed to find the plots and to take the measurements. And really anyone can learn to do it. It's a fun way to spend a few days in the woods around the property and perhaps poke around sections that you don't get to very often. But we cruised all the timber for our own property and took that data. And it was a fun, engaging learning process. And I encourage interested landowners to at least try to do it on their own, maybe with the guidance of a forester. But like I said, it's quite simple, and I think anyone can learn to do it. There may be some necessary thinning in other parts of the woods as well. Here's a pretty good example where we have 4 oak trees, 2 in the foreground and 2 in the back. And the 2 in the back are really nice, tall, straight trees. And the 2 in the front both have some dieback in the canopy and are struggling to compete for sunlight. So rather than allowing these 2 trees to struggle on for however many more decades, we may thin trees like this, which will allow for additional sunlight and less competition for nutrients in these nearby trees, and just allow them to really flourish. It can be challenging to choose which trees to thin out, but it's really important in the management of a woodland to think about the long-term health of the ecology and prioritize that over the individual trees. Ecosystems and woodland ecosystems, in no exception, thrive with events of patchy intermittent disturbance like wildfires and like herds of ruminants and other animals moving through that kickstart nutrient cycling and help maintain an ecosystem balance that, you know, the earth was able to flourish under long before human intervention on a broad scale that we see today. And so we can use the tools that we have to introduce these disturbance events and change the trajectory of the succession in our woodlands. And we understand enough through the studies of forestry and forest ecology what buttons to push and where to go in terms of steps to take to help push the woods in that direction. So that's it for today's video. Just wanted to walk around and show you a bit of our forest management plan and tell you some of the reasons why you might want to get one for your property, or if you know someone managing acreage with a lot of woodlands on it, why they might want to get a management plan in place. So you can contact a local for-profit forestry company. You can also reach out to your local county forestry agent or ranger through the state forest system, and they'll come out and have a conversation with you and put together a management plan at no cost. Those are tax dollars at work, so please consider that if you're wondering what to do with your woods and how to get help, both technical and in funding. That's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like it and leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.